Good evening. This is BBC Newsline. I'm Catherine Morrison with the headlines this Tuesday evening. A prolific sex abuser from Northern Ireland has been sentenced to 27 years in jail.
It destroyed me. I come out of school for several months. I never went back fully. I couldn't go back fully. It put me under the doctors for 5 years. Very suicidal.
A woman has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of missing Irish schoolboy Kieran Dernan.
MLAs are still debating whether or not to continue with Northern Ireland's controversial post-Brexit trading rules.
The head of TransLink apologises to passengers affected during recent traffic disruption in Belfast.
I'm not satisfied with the current level of punctuality and reliability we're delivering on our metro service at peak times. During the day, it runs well and effectively, and in the mornings as well. But at peak times in the evening, it's not running satisfactorily.
Jodie Gormley, former Tyrone player and Trillick manager, has died of cancer at the age of 53. We have tributes from former teammates and friends of a truly unique man.
And the next few days will be cold, often cloudy, but largely dry. I'll have your full forecast later.
Hello, thanks for joining us on this Tuesday evening. First, tonight, a prolific sex abuser from Northern Ireland has been sentenced to 27 years in jail. David John Andrews, whose address was given as Maghaberry Prison, pleaded guilty to 130 counts of sexual abuse. The charges, including attempted rape, threats to kill and inciting children to engage in sexual activity, relate to 47 victims, 46 of whom were children. Many of Andrew's victims were from England. The judge told the court that much of the detail of the offending was too harrowing and vile to be repeated. Our reporter Eve Rosato was in court.
It started when I was really young. We met each other on Instagram, and at first it started off as a friendly conversation, and then it got more threatening to send these photos, which in the end I did send them.
Like many of Andrew's young victims, Claire, not her real name, was groomed and exploited by him online. She thought he was a teenage boy. When she cut off contact with him, he took indecent images of her and sent them to her friends. They were then circulated around her school.
It destroyed me. I come out of school for several months. I never went back fully. I couldn't go back fully. It put me under the doctors for 5 years. Very suicidal, self-harming. I blamed myself.
The judge at Downpatrick Crown Court this morning said Andrews was a chilling and prolific sex abuser, and that the detail of his offending was simply too vile and harrowing to be repeated. 46 of his 47 victims were children, the youngest just 8. The attempted rape charges in this case related to a young woman who was profoundly disabled, unable to speak or consent. Andrews abused her for years. Claire's mum told me what it was like to find out her daughter had been exploited online.
It makes you feel like you failed. Obviously, she was in her bedroom scared, sending these pictures because he was threatening, and there was nothing I knew. If I knew about it, I could have stepped in. It just make you feel like, as a parent, you failed.
This was a complex case, and Claire has waited years to see this sentencing.
It's been torturing. It's been hard to wake up every morning and try and get on with normal life. It's like you're kind of, in a way, you're kind of locked away as well. I'm hoping I can finally close the lid on this part of my life and rebuild what I've lost.
All I could say to other parents is, if you think your child's in danger, check the devices. If they do come forward, believe every word they say. Because some people wouldn't believe it, but believe me, every word comes out to be true.
That was the mother of a survivor we're calling Claire, ending that report from Eve Rosado. If you've been affected by any of the issues raised in that story, information and support is available on the BBC Action Line. A woman has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of missing Irish schoolboy Kyran Durnan. The little boy was last seen alive in May 2022, but wasn't reported missing until this August. An audio recording which raises key questions in the investigation into his disappearance is being broadcast for the first time today by BBC Spotlight. Kyran had been alleged to be at school here, but no cross-border checks were ever carried out. Spotlight's Mandy Macaulay has this story.
Kyran Durnan was first reported missing in August, but Gardaí now say more than 2 years have passed since he was last seen alive.
So the case is utterly horrifying. I mean, this is a child who's completely vanished off the face of the planet.
Keelan Gallagher KC is Ireland's Special Rapporteur on Child Protection. She wants to know how a child can disappear, apparently unmissed by the wider world.
When he went missing, absolutely no one spotted that. That's why it seems to me that although we don't yet know the detail, we do know that this was a child who was fundamentally very badly failed.
BBC Northern Ireland's Spotlight programme has reviewed the timeline of Kyran's last known sightings. In October this year, the Garda said he hadn't been seen since May 2022 and announced they were conducting a murder inquiry.
What we've worked at is trying to identify proof of life since the last actual sighting in 2022. But we have our work to do. This is a murder investigation, and you can be assured that we are pursuing it with full vigour and resources.
But Kyran's grandmother, Rhonda Tyson, had claimed in an interview to journalist Andrew Spearman that the boy and his mum, Dela, were both in her house in August of this year, more than 2 years after Garda believe he disappeared. Spotlight is broadcasting that interview for the first time.
Let's just go through the basics first. So Dela and Kyran, isn't it? Kyran?
Yeah, Kyran.
Yeah. Last seen on Wednesday, the 28th, 11 p.m. Whereabouts was that?
It was here. They were sleeping on the couch because only the small rooms upstairs.
Yeah.
Days later, Dela Durnan was located by police in Britain without her son Kyran. I spoke to the journalist who conducted the interview.
What was your reaction when you heard the news that Kyran was presumed dead for 2 years?
I was absolutely gobsmacked. I was shocked to the core. I think, how could that be? Either she was lying through her teeth to me, or the guards are wrong.
Spotlight asked Rhonda Tyson if she stands by her account, and she did not respond. Mandy Macaulay, BBC Newsline.
Well, Mandy is with me now. So, Mandy, just bring us up to date on this latest development.
Well, Catherine, we've been immersed in this story for many weeks ahead of tonight's broadcast, trying to find out what happened to Kyran Durnan. We've been in Drogheda, Dundalk and across the UK. Until now, it's been very quiet. Then the first major breakthrough coming late this afternoon. Gardaí have announced that they have arrested a woman. We believe she is in her 20s on suspicion of murder. She has been arrested under Section 4 of the Criminal Justice Act. We believe that they have 24 hours to question her at a Garda station in the northeast of the country. They have also made a separate appeal to anyone, any member of the public out there who has any information, no matter how insignificant, about this case, to come forward.
OK, Mandy, thank you for that update. Well, you can watch Spotlight on BBC One tonight at 10:40. The programme Kyran the Lost Boy is on the iPlayer already. Now to Stormont, where MLAs have been debating whether to continue with Northern Ireland's Brexit deal for another 4 years. They'll get a vote on it later tonight. One of the major impacts of that deal, now known as the Windsor Framework, has been the creation of an Irish Sea border. It's meant that since 2021, businesses have had to deal with additional checks and controls on goods coming from Great Britain. Our political correspondent Jane McCormack has more.
Christmas may be a time for giving, but getting our MLAs to agree on Brexit is a wish even Santa can't grant. having dangled over Stormont for the past 4 years. This vote saw parties stay true to tradition.
There are those, both prior to the Brexit referendum and after, who appear intent on pursuing a strategy of political self-sabotage on a grand scale, regardless of the implications for peace on this island or the prosperity of businesses, communities and citizens in the north.
Northern Ireland consumers are impacted by the inability of GB suppliers supplying them in Northern Ireland. I mean, who has not seen examples where at Christmas time, members? It's pantomime season for many of the members opposite. Yes.
Pantomime or politics, we've seen this before.
May McFettridge would be, I think, jealous of that performance. It was one of the great ham acts of the pantomime season. But this is a serious issue that we are debating today.
This entire debate feels a bit like, hello actions, let me introduce you to consequences. Yeah. Today's democratic consent motion, where we decide whether or not to continue with Articles 5 to 10 of the Windsor Framework, marks another important moment in our long journey towards some kind of stability.
At least one thing was different today. Cross-community consent is a regular feature of voting here, but not this time. Instead, it only needed a simple majority, a majority that rests with the non-unionist parties.
Articles 5 to 10.
Prompting warnings like this.
Being partial with community consent on major constitutional issues like this will have profound and long-lasting implications. Please allow that thought to sink in.
The only reason that any of you across this chamber are not howling about this is because it is not in your interest on this particular issue. Because I would reiterate, this is the first and only key decision that this House will be voting on that absolutely tears asunder the key values and principles.
Not so long ago, argument over red and green lanes put this place in a deep freeze. Despite the recent thaw, on Brexit, there's always a chance of more icy ground. Jane McCormack, BBC Newsline, Stormont.
Well, that debate is still continuing. Our political editor, Enda McClafferty, is at Stormont for us. And Enda, is the debate going according to the script?
Well, not for the first time, Catherine. It feels like we've turned the clock back here at Stormont, rerunning many of those Brexit battles. The debate has been running now for some 3 hours. It could go for another 3 hours. And so far, we've had accusations of a zombie assembly, of a rigged vote. Even the Spice Girls got a mention during the exchanges. It's pretty clear what the DUP tactics are. They're maximising this opportunity to go through their undying opposition to the protocol. We've had one DUP MLA, for instance, talking for an hour and 7 minutes. Those on the opposite side of the House are very clear. This is a reminder, a time for them to say the DUP, of course, supported Brexit, and what the other parties are trying to do is to minimise the impact of Brexit. So there's still some way to go in this debate, but I think we're pretty sure of how it's going to end.
Yeah, well, when that vote does eventually come, what way are we expecting it to go? Well,
as unpredictable as some of the debate has been at times, the outcome is certainly not, because we do know that the majority of MLAs in the chamber are going to vote for the continuation of the post-Brexit trading arrangement. What will that mean then? Well, the Secretary of State then will be under a legal obligation to trigger a 6-month review of the arrangements. There will be a hearing in Westminster, a hearing also here at Stormont, and there will be recommendations which the Secretary of State will have to set out how he plans to respond to. But those recommendations will be about improving the workings of the Windsor Framework and not, in a sense, removing it or indeed removing the controversial Irish Sea border, which we know, of course, is what the unionist parties dearly want.
And for now, thank you. The head of TransLink has apologised to passengers who've been affected during the recent disruption to some bus services caused by traffic congestion, like scenes like these, in Belfast. He says they're doing all they can to lessen the impact. His comments come after the Infrastructure Minister, John O'Dowd, said he would give more money to subsidise public transport if he could. And he said whilst there have been some delays to services, the vast majority are running. Bernie Allen has more.
Congestion is what motorists driving into Belfast city centre should expect. That's according to the Infrastructure Minister, who says there are too many cars in a limited space.
Those who claim to have the interests of Belfast at heart would do well not to be broadcasting constantly
there's traffic chaos in Belfast. There is traffic congestion in Belfast. Last Thursday night was particularly difficult as a result of traffic accidents on the M1 and M2, the weather conditions and failure of traffic lights at the Armour Road.
The SDLP's Matthew O'Toole scheduled an urgent question in the Assembly on traffic congestion.
You can't simply wait until things are at gridlock and then tell people, well, you should have got out of your car in the first place. If he's serious about public transport, then he should be serious about what his investment plans are.
The Department for Infrastructure has suggested that people work from home for a day a week to help alleviate the problem.
We've been trying really hard in the city. Loads of the employers have been incentivising their staff to come back into work. And that's really good for the city. It increases footfall, increases city spend. And I don't think it was a great suggestion that we would in some way regress in that front.
Traffic is traditionally problematic in the run-up to Christmas. But the closure of the Boyne Bridge, no alternative routes and traffic light issues means this year has been extra challenging.
I'm not satisfied with the current level of punctuality and reliability we're delivering on our metro service at peak times. During the day, it runs well and effectively, and in the mornings as well. But at peak times in the evening, it's not running satisfactorily.
John O'Dowd says there needs to be an informed debate on the issue, and that there is no quick fix to the current situation.
Well, Bernie is in the city centre for us this evening. Bernie, we're a wee bit past the peak of the rush hour, but how were things this evening?
Yes, Catherine, as you can see behind me, well, actually, that's the best that I've ever seen it. But about an hour or so ago, it was pretty busy, but not as bad as some of the evenings that we have been seeing. Now, today, the Infrastructure Minister, John O'Dowd, talked about those congestion comments. He said he feels they've been taken out of context and that it's simply his duty as Minister to let people know to expect congestion and to take public transport. Now, we also heard from TransLink. They say that if we're going to solve this long term, that around 20% of people are going to have to leave their cars at home. And finally, Belfast Chamber, well, they say they've been requesting a meeting and that it was scheduled for January. It's now been rearranged for this week.
OK, Bernie, thank you. Dozens of newlyweds have spoken of their anger and frustration at not getting their wedding films, despite paying thousands of pounds. The BBC has seen signed contracts between couples like Siobhan and Paul and a videography business called Northbound Hearts in Limavady. The contracts state that payments were made in advance of weddings, and correspondence shows some couples have been waiting for their films for a year or even longer. Dean McLaughlin has the story.
It's known to be one of the happiest days of people's lives, and it was for Siobhan McGowan and her husband Paul from Drumcerne. They got married in December last year, but more than 1 year on, they still don't have their full-length wedding film by Northbound Hearts. Siobhan signed a contract and paid £1,400.
After the wedding, he sent, obviously it was an automatic email to say we had a brilliant day, which now I know everyone got, just the same spiel. That he would be in contact whenever he had the video, and then months passed and I just thought at this point that's it, we're never getting the video as other people haven't got theirs.
20 newlyweds have reached out to the BBC with similar stories to Siobhan's, saying they're angry over receiving little to no communication. Trading Standards said it cannot comment on individual cases, but that people should be aware of their rights.
Ultimately, you have rights under consumer protection legislation. You're entitled to a full or partial refund depending on the level of service delivered. But in most cases, people really want their goods provided, so they should write and contact formally to the trader, ask them to give details on when they're going to provide the service, when they're going to get their video, and set a time frame for that.
Oh, it would just be lovely to have it. Like it was one thing that when after the wedding we were so excited to sit down again with the family and watch it, and it's just not fair that we paid that money alone, but not the money, the memories like that you'd have forever.
The BBC reached out to Nathan Henry from Northbound Hearts after months of looking through documents and speaking to couples. In his response via email, he said he was incredibly sorry for any distress caused and a lack of communication. He also said that he's been struggling with an illness for the past few years and that any outstanding films will be completed soon. Brides like Siobhan will continue to wait. Dean McLaughlin, BBC Newsline.
OK, let's take a quick look ahead to an important story coming up tomorrow. Our health correspondent, Mary-Louise Connolly, can tell us more.
That's right, Catherine. This story impacts thousands of women living in the Southern Health Trust. And tomorrow, 2 reports will be published about the review into cervical smears. At the heart of this story is the underperformance of screeners and the lack of action taken by management into what was happening in their laboratory. Now, that resulted in 2 women's deaths, other women being diagnosed with cancer as their smears were misread. Now, while around 17,500 women were invited to come in for their smears to be rechecked, it's my understanding that dozens of women's lives have been adversely impacted. Now, ahead of tomorrow's report, the Southern Trust has been phoning around some women. I understand those calls have been made. And we will have the full story across BBC News NI from first thing tomorrow morning.
OK, Mary-Louise, an important one. Thank you. BBC News NI understands the Health Minister has put forward an enhanced pay offer to health unions. Mike Nesbitt met representatives this afternoon. It came as he unveiled his 3-year strategic plan for health and social care in Northern Ireland, which he says will tackle obesity and health inequality and cut waiting times, depending on future budget settlements.
I think it is both ambitious and realistic. Realistic because the budget isn't there to do everything I would like to do, which is why I'm starting under the umbrella of stabilisation. There are some specifics in there. You're always going to get people in the chamber saying, we want more detail, we want timelines, we want targets. There's quite a few in there, and there will be more because this 3-year plan will be followed by much more detailed annual costed plans.
I don't think it's realistic to call it a plan. It's much more like a wish list of things that we need to do, but we already know this. But there's no magic wand for delivery. It's all framed around we don't have enough money, and yet there's no discussion about efficiency, performance, productivity within health and social care. One would expect a plan would have metrics, timescales, accountability, and how do we know what success looks like? This is just a repackaging of what we already know.
OK, sport now, and Thomas Niblock is here. Thomas, it was only 6 weeks ago that you interviewed the Tyrone legend Jody Gormley on your podcast. He was talking about his cancer diagnosis. His death was announced yesterday evening. Just so sad and tragic for all those who knew and loved him.
Yeah, it's beyond words, and so many loved him and so many liked him. And whilst you would expect that of his family, his children, his mum is still living, and all his teammates for Tyrone and Trillick, not to count the people he trained with Antrim and all his friends and family. The strange thing is, Catherine, that so many people loved him and liked him and never even met him. And that was thanks largely to the podcast, which was really, really difficult and really, really challenging culturally and in so many ways. And that's because of a number of reasons. He was young, he was fit, he was healthy. And Jody Gormley, it has to be said, he was cut from different cloth. But unfortunately, he died. And on November the 1st, when this photograph was taken, was just after we recorded the podcast, the GAA Social. And when we recorded that podcast, he knew that he was going to die. But it didn't deter him in an open and frank interview with a cancer diagnosis.
I have no fear of dying. Absolutely no fear of dying whatsoever. I mean, as I said to you, I've felt blessed throughout my whole life. I suppose the sadness is the fact that it's the people you're leaving behind. You know, that I'll not get to see my son is training hard with Trillick. You know, he's come back after a couple of years. That I'll not get to see him play. That I'll not get to see my family grow up and mature. And that's, I suppose, not scary. It's just, it's sad, really. That's the reality. You know, when you peel it all back, it's the people close to you that you're not going to have those experiences with. You know, that's the sad, that is the genuine sadness.
But such was Jody Gormley's positivity. Even in what were to be his final days, he held what he called a gathering, or a living wake, with friends, family and teammates.
He always had a smile on his face and a person of humour, you know, but he was never overbearing, over-imposing, Jody. And on that day, there was an element of sort of, you know, there was such joy because it was like a reunion for all of us. You know, I came out of it almost uplifted, knowing that, you know, face on to the difficulties in life, and Jody was setting that out for everybody that day. And I think his words to me were, listen, Fergal, no sad stories here. Jody was always blessed with serious positivity. And, you know, in those days in midfield, you'd have been talking about who you marked. Jody wanted the big name, he wanted the big player, because like this battle, he you know, wanted to face them down and wanted to do his best for Tyrone.
Jody Gormley's having an outstanding game today.
When it came to football itself, there was nothing complicated about him. He knew what way the game should be played. He played it hard and he played it fair, be it with Trillick, Jordanstown, which he loved playing for as well, and Tyrone. He was a passionate Trillick man and he loved his county. And I think it was his ambition to get involved at some stage, and the way that he was going and the manner in which he was managing teams, I think he would have got the chance to manage Tyrone at some stage as well. I just feel for his family and close friends, such a loss.
I feel that this is nearly not the right thing to say, but how would you like to be remembered?
I'd just like to be remembered as a decent person, you know, who helped people out as much as I could, tried to find areas to help people improve, you know, to improve their life and just give them a wee nudge in the right direction, you know, and obviously a Trillick man.
Definitely a Trillick man. That's Jody Gormley, who died yesterday evening. That is your sport this evening.
Thomas, thank you. Lovely tributes there to Jody Gormley. Well, wintry skies everywhere today. Cecilia's here with the weather. What's the latest?
Yeah, cold and cloudy, Catherine, today, and the chilly weather is going to hang around for a few days. That cloud tonight will determine how much frost and fog there is. So this morning in County Tyrone, temperatures hit -6 and there was dense fog, although most of that has lifted, but it could get foggy in the west tonight again, whereas over towards Belfast and parts of County Down, the cloud is likely to stick around for most of this night, and you may well get away without any frost. So the clearer skies are likely across parts of the west, possibly down to -3, -4 degrees. That will lead to frost in some places tomorrow morning, but not everywhere, and also the risk of some dense freezing fog, again, particularly across the west. That could hang around all day, but in many places it will be dry and chilly. Quite a lot of cloud at times, especially in the east. The best of the breaks probably in the west, but here temperatures will be well below average. So a lot of chilly, dry weather to come tomorrow. And then again tomorrow night, there will be the risk of some frost and fog. On Thursday, much of the island still dry with a lot of cloud. Temperatures close to the average in some areas of the east, but we are going to see a bit of a change. It is going to gradually turn milder towards the end of the week. We still got the chilly air initially on Friday and Saturday, but milder air moves in on Sunday, bringing some showers and a brisk wind. Quite a lot of cloud on Friday with perhaps a bit of drizzle, but some brighter skies should develop for Saturday.
Cecilia, thank you. That's it for now. Our late news is at 10:30. Until then, you can keep up to date with the BBC News NI website and with Radio Ulster. Bye-bye.